That means we can spend the rest of the time with Professor Godfred Bockman. He's a professor of finance and economics at the University of Ghana. And Prof, I know that you sat through over 5 hours of the vetting of Casil Atto Forson. I wonder, forgive me, Casil Atto Forson. He corrected us all yesterday, didn't he? I wonder, again, let's start with the quality of questions. There were over 5 hours of questions. Do you think the committee got to the heart of issues? Did they get the best out of that vetting process?
I think that's fairly okay. A lot was expected because the economy is a big issue in the run-up to the campaign. And therefore, in terms of the expectations that people had, or some of us, we felt that the questions were a bit, some of them were quite straightforward and probably required some direct answers. But on a certain level, you will see the minister designate didn't want to commit so much. And probably would prefer to defer to more details when the budget is read or when the whole cabinet is put in place and then the direction is clear. But I think overall, I would say that it was fairly okay. I had a bit of a higher expectation, and forgive me. The reason is that the minister designate is not an outsider. He doesn't need the liberty of learning on the job that much. And he doesn't need a honeymoon to get to a bit more details in some of the responses. And I have two principal reasons. One, he was once a deputy minister of finance. He himself indicated that he had been a member of the finance committee. Given the prominence that the NDC itself placed on the economy, I want to believe that it was one of the reasons why they elevated him to be the minority leader. So there's a wealth of experience over the years that he has accumulated that one was thinking that would have been brought to bear in some of those responses. In fact, the reason that would be very fundamental is that you need to signal that to the market, that you know exactly what you are talking about. In as much as you don't want to be so specific or detailed, you are comfortable enough to give some hints to the market that it looks as though you started the job even yesterday. Also, so I think those are some of the things that I picked up. Some of the responses, I was quite happy. He was direct on the taxes, and I believe that he gathered the courage to stick his neck out. That yes, these taxes will have to go. I personally do not agree with all of them. I have a bit of a different view on the betting tax. Okay, a bit different from the party's position, but I agree with him totally that COVID-19 e-levy have to go, especially e-levy has to go like yesterday. Yeah.
Prof, did he satisfy you on how they intend to bridge the gap that will be created by the scrapping of these taxes?
Yeah, I felt that with his experience and the exposure, having been Deputy Minister of Finance, having been a member of the Finance Committee, minority leader, and all of that, the responses there were too general. And probably that wouldn't have inspired the market enough. That because when it comes to cutting wasteful spending, politicians talk about that every now and then. What it means exactly and the context has been missing. And if you check 2017 budget, when the new government took over and all of that, you can see some of those general words just run through, right? So I felt that he could have been a bit specific and lead the market. So that, because at the end of the day, one of the things that the NDC doesn't do quite well is communication with facts. For instance, when the government announced the creation of the new ministries, the Civil Service Act, baseline, some fiscal impact analysis could have accompanied the announcements, right? Or maybe right after that. These are the savings. These rationalizations will bring us. But of course, we have tried to do that here. Rather than leaving that to the market to guess how much will be saved and whether it's material or not, you could actually cure that. And that would only be consistent with our Public Financial Management Act. Actually, under Section 100 of the Public Financial Management Act, any bill or project or whatever that goes to Parliament must be accompanied by a fiscal impact analysis. In other words, how those proposed changes, either policy-wise or projects, how that would impact revenue and how that would impact expenditure for that fiscal year for which the bill or the project relates to. So I think going forward, those are some of the things that they have to do. That would only strengthen their communication and guide the markets in consolidating the confidence that that comes along with the goodwill this government has gotten. Already you can see that in the money market, right? So if you look at in the run-up to the election, government was practically struggling to meet its targets in the money market, in the short end of the yield curve, November, first week of December and all of that. But after the elections and especially the early concession of defeat by Dr. Baumia, I think that was an excellent move. Okay, so you can see that some level of restoration of confidence is coming back. So what the government needs to do, what the minister designate needs to do, is to be direct with his communication and to inspire the market, because you need that. Without that, when you talk about the economy, there's a technical economy, there's a communicative aspect of the economy that you have to manage. So when it comes to fiscal policy, of course, the technical side is very important. When it comes to monetary policy, the technical side is very important. But managing the expectation of the people and anchoring the expectation of the people in the direction government is going is very important. Okay. And oftentimes that is where we miss it. So, for instance, and I'm sure the minister designate will know how much was allocated, for instance, to the office of the president, government machinery. If you look at the Appropriation Act for 2023, which enabled government to spend for the 2024 fiscal year, from the Appropriation Act, over 2 billion cedis was allocated to government machinery. And that is almost how much e-levy is bringing. But you actually don't need that much over there. So I'm expecting that the president would have a lean staff base at the presidency or for purposes of carrying out government machinery and all of that. They're not like what we have seen under the previous administration. That was just to waste. And in fact, if you look at that, relative to other countries, in even our regional peers, you could see Nanado's record was an outlier. Okay, so there could be some low-hanging fruit that perhaps we can immediately lean on in reducing or in closing the gap. Okay. So that was another area. The other area I felt the minister designate was a bit economical. I want to believe that it's more about the political economy of it. It's also about the international perspective to that particular agreement. It's about the IMF supported program. Hello?
Yes, we're listening. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's about the IMF supported program. I believe that the NDC knows very well that their manifesto, their promises, meeting the aspirations of Ghanaians, given the election victory, there is no way they will be able to deliver on their mandate under the existing IMF supported program. If this is lost on them, then they have a long way to go.
Prof, hold on 1 minute. Are you suggesting that the promises made by the NDC cannot be fulfilled within the next 2 years because we're under an IMF program?
The program requires some tweaking, requires some adjustment, and I think the minister ought to be bold and direct on that. It is possible the IMF may not be comfortable with the suggestion that let's renegotiate the program, which probably may convey a certain meaning that the program failed, having claimed victory. Check the IMF supported the staff report and the rest of them until the December one that, hey, the program is working, fiscal consolidation is taking hold, inflation is coming down, buffers have been rebuilt, and all of that. But look, Kojo, Raymond, it is not lost on us. If you look at the IMF program, by design, structurally, it will constrain this government from delivering on its mandate. But our suggestion is not to walk away, and I agree with the minister. The issue is not to walk away. The issue is we must have a strategy to engage the fund. We must be deliberate about which aspects of the program we need to take another look. Look, if you look at the growth projections under the program from now to 2029, why should we be growing at that rate? That growth rate, if you achieve it, will not be sufficient to lift millions of Ghanaians out of poverty and narrow the inequality gap. I'll show you something. Because the fiscal consolidation measures under the program, and the minister designate agreed, okay, and in fact, since I started monitoring things in this country, it is probably the first time that almost all the political parties agreed that the country, private sector households have been overburdened with taxes. Even the NPP that spent the last 4 years of the administration to impose these taxes were asking for another 4 years from Ghanaians to remove some of those taxes. Now, if you look at the fiscal consolidation measures, disproportionately shift the burdens to households and private sector through higher prices, reflecting in higher productive cost base of doing business. So that is not surprising. Okay. You can check the data from Ghana Statistical Service. From November 2023, given the pass-through of the adjustment, you will see that inflation on locally produced items actually rose above inflation on imported items. And the trend is continuing. So what it means is that you are sacrificing the medium to long-term growth potential and competitiveness of our private sector and households for short-term praise, all in the name of bringing down inflation. Even that hasn't worked that much. Look at the data. If you take the honeymoon effect of the IMF-supported program when it was approved, the first few months, we call that one the honeymoon effect. After that, the program has practically hit a rock in bringing down inflation. We started in last year, 2024, with the inflation of 23.2% and ended the year with the inflation of 23.8%. Over 12 months, not much progress has been made. So we need to look at all of this. And then the reliance, look at the prescription from the fund. Monetary tightening. Look, since records started probably becoming public, all that Bank of Ghana has been doing is mopping up excess liquidity. This is all that we have been doing. When are we going to free up liquidity for households and private sector to expand, grow, create jobs? Okay. So I think that probably they don't want to be ahead of the curve or something. That's why the minister designate is being economical with the truth on that line. But I think that it is something the government, with the comprehensive victory and the new mandate, it is so just consistent with scripture to say a new wine deserves to be put in a new wineskin.
Great. Now, all the things you've talked about, Professor Bokbing, you make mention of, for instance, cutting down waste. You've talked about government machinery, 2 billion. But you'd agree that the gap that will be created by abolishing these taxes are more than 2 billion. The NDC,
that is just one line.
Yes, one. But the NDC itself also has certain promises where we must spend. Free promises. So, for instance, there's free tertiary fee payment for first years. And there are other things that they want to do. The question is, And today, even as we prepare the budget for March, what I gather is that the abolishment of these will lead to a 10 billion Ghana cedis gap that is needed to be filled. Where are we going to get that from?
Which are these taxes? E-levy?
E-levy, COVID-19 levy, betting tax, and rationalization of VAT.
Yes.
Yes. Put all of it together will lead to some 10 billion gap. So how are we going to fill that? What is and if you listen, you've talked about you've talked about the finance minister designate being general, and that's what politicians do, because in our bid to get an IMF program, we talked about how government had cut down on expenditure through the 30% reduction of salaries of government appointees. We talked about a reduction in fuel coupons. We talked about other things. It didn't amount to anything really. So.
Yeah, because government just wasn't stupid about that. Look, you have a point. Look at it this way. If you look at these taxes that have to go merely from the perspective of fiscal losses, then we are missing the point. Let's look at it as an incentive mechanism that government is offering to private sector and households to stimulate growth. Remember, it takes more than tax revenue to grow an economy.
Yeah.
So if you do the permutation and say that let's take off e-levy, let's grow the digital economy. And by the way, the digital economy is what holds the future for all of us. In fact, the future of finance, the future of economics, the future of money, businesses is increasingly digital. In fact, until this government, the previous government, introduced e-levy, which we opposed with all our minds, but it was not sufficient. We had predicted that in the next 5 years or so, you will only see a checkbook in a textbook, because Ghanaians were embracing Momo electronic way of doing things. In fact, the most direct way to spell financial inclusion, which has implications for inclusive growth, is through digitization. In fact, it's another way of also formalizing our economy and all of that. So if the digital economy is, so at the end, what will be your goal? To grow your economy, and more importantly, grow the digital economy. Which one will you choose? So, look, let's look at it this way. Taxation is not just an instrument to raise money. Taxation is also an instrument to promote, as an enabler to grow. So you can look at taxation as an investment concept. From there, we even talk about tax expenditures. Why do we give exemptions? Is it because we don't need those money? No, that's not the reason. Your primary objective is to grow your economy. The most effective way to collect more tax revenue or increase your domestic revenue mobilization is to grow your economy. That should be the priority, and that is where job creation can come from. In any case, hello?
Yeah, we are listening.
What are we talking about in 2025? In 2026, in the run-up to the general election, when the NPP conceptualized that the economy had moved from production to taxation and they needed to reverse that, let's go and check the 2017 budget. The number of taxes that were abolished, some rates reduced, merged, and all of that. In 2017, you can check, the fiscal loss was more than 1 billion. In fact, between 2017 and 2018, when you do the calculation at a lower exchange rate, the fiscal loss from the tax revisions that the NPP undertook in 2017, at a time when they were talking about free senior high school and all of that, from 2017 to 2018, together with reductions in utility prices that they did, practically put over 4 billion Ghana cedis in the pocket of households and businesses over that 2-year period.
Okay.
If you look at that exchange rate and you compare that to what we are talking about right now, so there is some price that we have to pay in order to stimulate growth, consolidate confidence, and rally Ghanaians behind your administration. Tell me, how many serious countries in this world, in our sub-region, actually have e-levy functioning the way we are doing it?
Okay. Well, I mean,
and then also, let's come to VAT. Hello?
Yes, I'm listening. Go ahead.
Let's come to VAT. Do you know that the VAT incidence rate is actually one of the highest in the whole of Africa? We send a wrong signal to the market that our standard VAT rate is 15% because we decouple the standard levies, the straight levies from the standard VAT rate. If it quakes like a duck, don't call it a chicken. So if you look at the incidence of that, the straight levies together with the standard VAT rate, you are looking at our VAT rate effectively in terms of the incidence of the tax, working up to above 21%. That is counterproductive. Is it surprising that businesses are relocating to Cote d'Ivoire and other places because it's just too costly setting up a production function in Ghana? Please, let me ask you, this economy we want to build solely through taxes, more taxes. For whom are we building this economy for?
Tell me.
Is it not for businesses? Is it not for households? Why do you want to kill them before arrival?
Do you have a problem with the finance minister designate's plan to increase tax to GDP to 16% by the time he's leaving office?
Well, I think that over a 4-year period and where we are now, of course, we have the medium-term revenue strategy, which actually talks about revenue to GDP ratio. We are looking at between 18 to 20% and all of that. It is possible. It is possible. Do you know why I'm saying so?
Tell me.
Great. Actually, studies have shown that you don't generate more tax revenue by increasing the rates unnecessarily. In fact, that itself may engineer low compliance. I can take you on a journey on the specific tax handles, and probably that is where, and I agree with the minister designate, that the existing tax handles, they are not yielding their optimal tax revenue. If that is the conclusion, then it means that the solution is not additional tax handles or deepening the tax.
But I mean, except that you have a problem with the betting tax, but he says the betting tax is not generating even up to 50 million Ghana citizens, so should be scrapped. But you say you have a problem with that. What's the problem then?
Let's look at what we want to promote. Behavioral aspect of it and all of that. So I'm saying that you need to look at it along beyond just the revenue and see as a country what is it that mirrors our aspirations, our values, and what do we want our youth necessarily to invest their time and all of that. So I think that is when you look at it along those continuum, then I'm a bit slow on that part, because I think the government should take another look and all of that. And then also look at it whether the excessive participation in betting is actually good for productivity growth and all of that. I think you need to look at it from that broader perspective and all of that. Okay, so you know that our VAT, the inefficiency in our VAT is more than 35%. So which means that we are under collecting through the deployment of the VAT. So what do you do from there? You don't increase that by increasing the rate. You look at more application of digitization, improve compliance and administrative reforms. That's what we need to do. In fact, Dr. Jokwachi and the others, they have done a study a couple of years ago where they concluded that the leakage in the tax revenue, in other words, we lose as much as we're able to collect. And these leakages do not lead to the sea. It actually leads to people's pockets and the rest of them. So we need to, and it will require the minister designate, right, working with GRA and the relevant stakeholders in ensuring that those gaps, loopholes are actually closed. Then the World Bank has also done another study about the efficiency of our corporate income tax handle. In fact, the inefficiency level is more than 55%. In fact, other studies also exist that we are not maximizing the tax potential from the CIT, the corporate income tax. So you don't close that gap by introducing e-levy or even COVID-19 or something. Of course, we are not talking about the emission tax, because really there's nothing to lose from there, because we have not really collected anything from that end, because the charging agent DVLA hasn't been properly enabled to charge that. And then also in terms of industrial payments, the Act talks about the fact that the emission has to be measured in tons. We actually don't have the equipment to measure that for purposes of collecting data. So really abolishing the emission levy is just more or less like the Act that exists in the textbook. Okay, so let's look at it from all of that. But at the end of the day, the sustainability of your revenue generation actually depends on how you are growing your economy. Now, let's look at it this way. The proportion of our agriculture to GDP, I think is almost 21% or so. It contributes less than 1% to our tax revenue. In Cote d'Ivoire, it's more than 10%. So there is the need for us to adopt a business approach to agriculture. And I was hoping, but I was a bit surprised. I was hoping that in the creation of the ministries, they would link agriculture to agribusiness rather than positioning it within Ministry of Trade and Industry. I think the linkages are much better and efficient and well connected if you situate agribusiness within Agriculture Ministry and all of that, right? But of course, that's what the government has done. But we can make progress. So we need to. The point is that you first need to grow a taxable economy. That will require some losses in the immediate. Okay, and in this country, it's not only government that is suffering. Look, it is never the case that it is only government that is fiscally constrained. Businesses are equally fiscally constrained. Households are equally fiscally constrained. It is not proper to conceptualize growth from the perspective that only government must be comfortable. No. In fact, in hard times, in challenging times like this, government will rather look at how they can sacrifice as an enabler to households and businesses to be able to grow, and the revenue will come. That is the way we should look at it. And I think that going forward, I like the approach the president has adopted in terms of rationalizing the ministries and the number of ministers and all of that. I think efficiency in government is a concept that must run through not just the central government, but as a general government approach to doing things where we stretch this across the state-owned enterprises and all of that, and say, look, there's a new way of doing things. In fact, actually, in economics, we are told that resources are limited, but that's not the problem. Those scarce resources are fertility uses. If they didn't have fertility uses, there would have been no difference between a richer country and a poor country. But where the focus will be is the fact that those scarce resources have alternative uses. So the extent to which you can maximize the alternative uses of those scarce resources, that's what makes the difference. Right. And I think I also agree with what the minister designate spoke about in terms of beyond a certain threshold when it comes to public procurement, it has to be validated through a value for money analysis and all of that. I think we need to hold them to the fire. We need to do that. Look, this same government, the data exists between 2012 and 2021, running to 2023. Nearly 85% of all government big-ticket procurement transactions were done through sole source or restricted tender. In fact, many of them actually didn't come with justifications as the Procurement Act specifies. Yeah. So that is where the game is, and that is where the political financiers make their returns. So overall, what we need to do now with civil society, from academics, from the media, is that how do we support government to ensure that all these loopholes are closed in a way that makes the return on political financing much lower than investing in treasury bill or investing in the real sector of the economy. For now, the return on political financing is very high, and that is why the incentive is also very high. we must work gradually. It's not going to be overnight in ensuring that this line of investment does not deliver above risk-adjusted returns more than probably what somebody invested in the real sector or in treasury or something would have gotten.
Prof, I want you to stay with us. We're going to take some messages. But when we come back, let's pay attention to Cassiel Attoforson's vision for the value of the cedi. He has some very strong targets that he set for the limiting of depreciation. Let's see how realistic they are when we come back from these messages. 9.7 FM. We're talking about the vetting that happened yesterday. 3 nominees for the portfolios of finance, energy, and justice were grilled by the 11-member appointments committee of parliament. Now, we're currently talking to Professor Godfred Bokpin of the University of Ghana about the vetting of the finance minister. Very interesting view so far. We spent a lot of time talking about tax and, what the president intends to achieve through that ministry in that area. And Prof. Bokpin has been analyzing some of these plans. Now let's talk about the cedi. One of the things that came through quite strongly in Attoforson's vetting was the target that he has set to bring down the cedi depreciation to 8% in the shortest possible time. Prof. Bokpin, how realistic is this, and what will it take to achieve such a goal?
That's quite a target. We will not start off by saying it is not possible. There is something about our politicians which gives me hope sometimes. When they are making certain statements, sometimes it's not necessarily born out of a vacuum. They know what they can do, and they know what they have to do. My worry is whether this sentiment, aspiration of the Minister of Finance designate will continue to remain in him for the next 3-4 years. That when he dips his toes into the hot waters of governance, management, interacting with party financiers and the conflict of interest and all of that, all that he has spoken about will not be lost on him. I pray that he will continue, probably once in a while, he should play back this vet in the recording and remind himself, because a lot could be lost in the process and all of that. So if you look, in the last 4-5 years, the critical anchor for the stability of the city have been weakened. Talk about cocoa. Look at our cocoa output now. That is not the only thing. We have not collaborated and engineered sufficient investments in the oil sector in terms of exploration and new discovery coming on board and all of that. Do you remember that in 2017, growth actually went up to about 8.1%? Largely on the back of also hydrocarbon production because of coming on board of additional fields, which were investments that were made probably before the NPP government took over in 2017. We were not able to sustain that. The conflict, self-interest, party interest, family interest versus the common interest ensured that even the desired investments from foreign capital in that sector, we couldn't realize it. So those are the things that we have to do. I think if you look at some of the things that they have spoken about, and of course, no Ghanaian should be carried away by these things. They are not achievements. These are good intentions, and we cannot substitute good intentions for accomplishment. It is up to them to translate these good intentions into actual. through strategy, configuration of human being resources, machines, all of that, to deliver on this mandate. So I will not say it is impossible. Look, let me give you a couple of examples. And I think the government should take another look at the Bank of Ghana's gold for oil, gold for reserves. The bulk of the gold for oil, buying from small scale and the rest of them, were paid for in cedis. This injection of liquidity into the economy, these miners in that value chain were actually not interested in keeping cedis. They were part of why there has been a sustained demand for FX across the market. And you will see that currency outside the banking sector has actually been rising. So we need to take another look at that. I know the NDC has spoken about the gold board and all of that. Oh, so you spoke about closing the gap. We forgot to add this. Don't worry, very soon we'll come out with our analysis. Do you know that through gold smuggling and under declaration, Ghana loses more than $2 billion annually? Gold smuggling through our porous borders, through Benin, Togo, and the rest of them. Under declaration, check gold exports as recorded in the books of Bank of Ghana. And then check the destination countries, how much gold they are saying they have imported from Ghana. Come on, you know,
that's
when the
30
president
billion
president said that Tisikaso, look, they know what they are talking about. Look, if you mean so well for this country, and you were coming from outside the political class, and you looked at Ghana's economy and all of that, and you could campaign the way the NDC and all of them campaigned, they knew what they would get from the system. They knew what the system would offer. They knew there's cash flow. It's just about alignment and all of that. So I think that is the way to go. So if you look at that alone, you are talking about over $2 billion annually. So there are sufficient loopholes that if we will be diligent, of course, would the government be willing to pay the price? Remember, there is an incentive to keep the system as it is right now. So to fight it, you have to be prepared. Some places, you don't go there with pen. You go there with hammer. You break it. You don't negotiate. And what it also means is that as we seek the common good, some people will have to give up something. They will not give up so easily. So government, in fact, this government must be willing to deal with the corruption within to gain confidence in the market. And it's just a matter of time, and it will show up. So I would say that, yes, so I believe that the government will put a little bit of focus on upstream oil, production, investment, and all of that. Of course, we are doing all of this in the face of energy transition, right? Every country must have its own specific way of navigating it through the energy transition. Okay, it should not be a blanket requirement. Okay, so look at that. So then you look at the cocoa sector. Then again, look at your gold sector. This economy is a gold economy and all of that. If you can block the leakages, streamline that sector, and make sure that we are getting the much needed fiscal revenue from all of this, these tax cuts will look immaterial in all of that. But in any case, before I continue, let's say this way, it is never the case that every country must develop necessarily by increasing your tax to GDP ratio. Look, if you look at it over time, some of the countries that we started with from 1957, 60s, and the rest of them, who today are much developed compared to us, I'm talking about Malaysia, Singapore, and the rest of them, their tax to GDP ratio hasn't been that outstanding. You can check for yourself, check from the OECD data and the rest of them. In fact, in any case, South Africa, their tax to GDP ratio is more than 25%. Has that delivered the much needed development for South Africa? So it is not true that we have not developed simply because we have not been able to scale up our tax to GDP ratio to, let's say, 16%, 18%, or 25%. No, it's simply because we have not explored sufficient efficiency in our expenditure. It is expenditure that stimulates growth. And that is what we need to focus on. And I believe that is where this government needs to. And if you're able to do all of this, one of the things that undermines the stability of the local currency is a lack of confidence.
Right.
If people believe in this administration, that look, President Mahama will walk his talk and talk his walk. And this will not just be a 120-day wonder. And this sentiment and aspirations will not be lost on them for the next 1 year, 2 years, and all of that. You will see how confidence itself will do its part in the stability or recovery of lost value. You will see it.
Now, one of the things he did try to do was to instill confidence. He assured the committee that they shouldn't worry. Ghana will not default on its debts. I heard that, and I put it alongside the same person who, in this same vetting, had said that he hasn't got eyes on the budget. So there are so many questions he can't answer. Where is he getting the confidence from to tell us that we will not default?
You know that he was being economical with some of the questions in terms of the responses. Probably he didn't want to give himself up so early and all of that. So you could see that clearly. I mean, they know the numbers fairly. But of course, in terms of the total fiscal deficit and all of that, that one you have to wait a bit until all the numbers trickle in. That I can agree with him and all of that. But in terms of our exposure in the debt market and all of that, I think reasonably we know the outlook. And that is why I would suggest that probably they didn't want to communicate that to the public, but the IMF program should be looked at again. If the fund itself is not comfortable with renegotiation or whatever, in whatever way they have to tweak it to accommodate the aspirations and the desires of Ghanaians going forward, that has to be done. And possibly, I will go for that, an extension of the program beyond 2026. The reason I say so is that if the program is ending just next year, there is risk. What happens? Now, if you extend the program to, let's say, 2027, 2028, that gives some kind of stability. That can also anchor investment in your country for that number of years, right? And that would engineer portfolio flows and FDI flows to complement your foreign reserves to show up the stability of the currency. That would also help in jump-starting the bond market, the domestic bond market. You know, I wouldn't say we have been priced out of the, and we all know, of the medium to the long-term end of the yield curve in terms of the bond market as well as the international capital market. So we need to reopen that market. You need an anchor. People want to plan for a little longer. Okay, and therefore, if the program is ending next year, it brings its own uncertainty and all of that. So I think the government can cure that. And I know when it comes to politicians, the tag that we are going to IMF, or even so, we are extending it and all of that, probably contributed to why the minister designate was a bit evasive on that. But we have to take those hard decisions as early as possible. So once we extend that, it gives us room and stability to be able to also roll out our own homegrown policies that would grow our economy and then create jobs. Other than that, it's going to be difficult. But I think overall, we need to collaborate with indigenous private sector. There is no way our economy will grow sustainably the way indigenous private sector increasingly is going down. We must be deliberate. We must identify critical sectors. Look, I'm expecting this president, by the time he's done, to say that, look, I identified 5 priority sectors and I moved some SMEs to become big companies, some across the sub-region, the continent, and maybe beyond. We must be deliberate, regardless of their political affiliations. We have to do that. Look, a certain leader in Nigeria decided that he wants to create billionaire businesses. And he used his leadership to create the enabling environment and facilitate the entry of Nigerian businesses into a number of African countries. Government cannot succeed alone. The strength of the state is dependent on the strength of its indigenous private sector. More, I'm not preaching against foreign capital, but you see, we must have a clear strategy that allows indigenous private sector to coexist with foreign capital.
Yeah.
Other than that, we will pound just enough for others to go and eat.
Prof, in what ways, that's if you think he can be different, can Dr. Kasiel Atoba Forsen be different from Kenneth Nanaya Kuntun Kununku Oforiata?
That's it. It must be driven by the common good. The NDC, including Kisley, the minister designate, must decide whether they will choose to stay in power over a long period of time, where over an extended period of time, the gain that would accrue to them will be much better than prioritizing selfish, personal, family, political interest in the short term. This was the problem of the MPP. So they have to decide. And I believe, and I want to suggest to them, that they should choose integrity, honesty, that put the people ahead, that allows them to stay in power for, let's say, 16 years, so that over time, people will have the opportunity to also play their part in the governance continuum and also recover something, rather than trying to satisfy the party pressures that are mounting and all of that. If they will choose the medium to the long term, a plan, they should have a plan. How long do you want to stay in power? What do we need to do to continue to stay in power for the next 16 years or so? Okay, what does it require? What sacrifices do we need to make in the next 4 years so that we are able to sustain this goodwill and stay in power for long and deliver on a sustainable result consistent with the 5 P's? That development must reflect, must impact the people, must preserve our planet Earth, must preserve peace, it must be about partnership, prosperity. Those are the things that I think they need to do. Sometimes in Africa, our problem is that we are too short-sighted. Okay, so if you look at in terms of the Causes Cultural Index and all of that, a lot the description is that we can't plan for long. We can't plan for long.
Prof.
When the African gets power, and that power gives him access to money, the next level is the slave queen economy.
On that note,
Prof, that's a perfect place to end this conversation. Thank you so much for your time with us. Professor Godfred Bokpin is a professor of finance and economics at the University of Ghana. Wow, the slave queen economy.